Hi, I'm here to share a lesson or a few lessons, parts of a few lessons about how if we've had, say, a loss in our family, maybe a very good friend, um, I'm going to tell a bit of a story that I sort of had a reckoning with at a funeral with three close friends. What had happened is we'd lost an aunt that was an absolutely tremendous lady. She was very smart. She was a yoga instructor. She was a professor for a bunch of years in school. Prior to that, a teacher for many, many years. Um, Loved to share what it was that she knew with all of us. It was tremendous. So we're sitting around after the fact, and we're in a beautiful backyard. We're having a drink. I think Janice had a juice. Cindy had some water. Julia had a coffee. I was honestly thinking about having a beer. I thought I better not. I had to drive home. But I sort of asked a few questions of them. I said, you know, I miss her very much. But can I ask you guys some questions? Just something that I've been mulling over in the past, and I just would like to know. And they said, sure. And I said, Janice, for example, let's start with you. How long, if we were to relate this to time, would it be for you to get back to normality? Hmm? Yeah, just to where you're back normal, you know, after this traumatic event for us. And she said, oh gosh, it would have to be at least 6 months because I so greatly miss her. I miss her so much. I miss already that she's not here. Who am I going to call? Who am I going to speak to? I miss her so much. Yeah, definitely. At least 4 months. And I said, okay, Cindy, what about you? Oh my gosh, I don't think I could get over her in 4 months and be back to normal. It would have to be at least six. I so miss the conversations already that we had all the time. She was always my go-to person if I had a problem or needed to speak to in regards to do's and don'ts and what I should and shouldn't do. I love her. I miss her so much. It would have to be at least 6 months. At least 6 months. And I said, okay, awesome. Julia, what about you? And Julia said, oh my gosh, I miss her, yes, but I have to be back to normal tomorrow. I, like you, Janice, have two kids, a job. I've got to get back to work to pay the bills. I have to be back to normality for my kids and for my workplace tomorrow. I have no choice tomorrow. And I said, okay. What about if I could say to all three of you that I know what it is that you say to yourself or would say to yourself in one way or another after Janice, say you're 4 months, Cindy, you're 6 months, or Julia, you've got to be back to work tomorrow. If I knew what you're going to say to yourself while maybe looking in the mirror, for example, that next day for Julia, at the end of 6 months for Cindy, what might you say to yourself? You know, well, I don't know. Would you like to know? Because I know. And they all went, oh, of course, what? I'm not going to suffer anymore. I am not going to suffer starting right now. And Janice went, what? It's not that easy. And I went, no, it's not. There's other things that can come into play, and other things that we might be walking down the street one day and we might smell Auntie's perfume. And guess what? That's going to trigger a response from us, right? Hopefully it's not a negative response. Hopefully it's a response that somebody that has moved on and time has been spent would look at. They would look at, yes, I miss them, but I'm going to focus on what I learned from them, the great times that I had with them, the things that they shared with me that I'm going to share with my kids. That's the stuff that I want to focus on. Now, we may think that saying that I'm not going to suffer anymore as of right now works for everybody. It doesn't. But it's a starting point. We also need to look at focusing on the positive side of this. I learned so much from them. She was such a smart, tremendous lady. The stories she shared and told, I'm going to share and tell those to my kids one day. I am. Yes, I miss her, but I'm going to focus on what I learned from her, what I can share with my kids. If I'm half the person she was, I would be a better person for it. And Jenna said, oh my gosh, I never really looked at it that way. And Cindy said, oh, but I'm still going to have to suffer for a long time. It's just who I am. And I said, can I share something with you? We tend to focus on what we don't have, and we tend to focus on negativity because it's part of who we are, maybe. I mean, I'm going to give you an example of how we're brought up all through school. And the teachers, the first thing they do after an exam or a test is they focus on what we got wrong. They might even say, hey, good job. You know, you got 93 on that math exam. That person knows how to do math. They're good at it if they got 93 out of 100. But because over and over we focused on what we got wrong, we can become that if we're not careful. So might we look at and focus on and put more time on what we got from that math exam, for example, what I learned from it. The reasons for me getting 93 was because I know how to do math. The reasons for me getting over this traumatic event with our aunt was because I said to myself, I'm not going to suffer anymore. I'm going to remember all of the great things about her, the things that I learned from her, the stuff that I am going to share with my kids gladly. This is just part of what we might go through. But what I'm saying is that if we relate our suffering to time and we say, do I have that time? Can I suffer for that long, or should I? I'm going to say no, you shouldn't. I'm going to honestly say that the quicker you get to, I'm not going to suffer right now, and think about the positive, amazing things that you've learned from that person that isn't there anymore. I'm not saying that you'll have little bouts of sadness and that perfume that you smell walking down the street, that was the one that she wore. Sure, it might trigger something negative, but what I want you to say is, I'm not going to suffer anymore. Because more importantly, do you think the person that isn't there anymore, would want you to suffer? No. They want you to share what they taught you. They want you to share what you learned from them. That's legacy. That's sharing amazing things about that person. Life is too short, and it needs to be spent right now thinking positively and staying happy, not sad. Bye for now.